What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. I know you think I'm talking too loud right now because you gave me the look already, Carm. Welcome
I
to
think
Sunday
I
nights.
think I think you are a little paranoid, Joel, because I absolutely was.
Welcome to Sunday nights with Carm on the case. Carm, not worried about you interrupting me tonight. I'm worried about you interrupting our guests. So let me get this out here and we'll get cracking. Today, you're about to hear the remarkable story of the case that defined Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson's career. The story is detailed in his new book, aptly called The Case, available right now as we speak on Amazon at a discounted price. Right now, The Case available on Amazon.
It just came out on March 2nd, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
March 2nd, and today is, March 12th. Been out 10
so it
days.
only came out 10 days ago.
Hot off the presses. And the best guest, as you can assume, is Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson, a retired Birmingham Police Department veteran with 27 years of experience in law enforcement. The Detective Sergeant also co-hosted Investigation Discovery ID channel television series Reasonable Doubt, and you've seen him before for sure on A&E's first 48 Birmingham. He is also a host of the Crime and Cookie Juice podcast, and as we mentioned, author of the just released book, The Case. Go out and buy it now. A quick couple of programming notes. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitter. We are at Podcast STS. And look at this, guys. Best guests in true crime right here. We're getting a merch store put up on survivingthesurvivor.com. Hats, shirts, magnets. You can put my mom on your refrigerator. Who doesn't want to see my mom yelling at them?
But you should say best guests and best people watching.
100%. We have one that says STS Nation. And look at this. Sky Ricky writes, I received the book. Congratulations. Followed by Miss Linda. I just received my book today. Followed by, Allie Snow saying STS. Followed by HK Schubert saying, Chris, you are super smart. He sure is. Followed by Brandy saying, love you, Chris. And HK Schubert also saying a couple, hello, Chris and Joel and Joel's mom.
Hi.
And 503 Decal. Hi, Carm. Hi, Joel. Okay, so, Chris, without further ado, for those of you who have been living under a rock, and obviously the future has not, because they write, love Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson. He was great on First 48 and Reasonable Doubt, and is definitely a best guest. STS Nation for sure. So, Chris, 27 years, I believe, you were in law enforcement. Some of those years as a homicide detective. This book is about the case, hence the title, The Case. Someone on here, I wish I could find it because I just skipped over it, and might be a great place to start, although it might jump us ahead. Where did that go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Anyway, it's right here. Where did it go? Someone asked, what was that 911 call like for this case? I don't know if that's a good place to start, but kick us off. Tell us why this case resonated, and tell us about it, because we really don't know much of the story, as I don't think most of STS Nation. So wherever you'd like to begin, let's start there.
We are ordering the book, but we didn't order it yet.
Already interrupted.
It's quite all right. So I'll start talking about the night that call came in. See, let me give you a little bit of background. I've been an investigator for probably 7 or 8 years before this night ever happened. And my years in investigative work, I had I'd done everything that I could to be the best investigator I could be, but I wasn't much of a husband. I wasn't much of a father back then. I thought that the job was, as a father, I believed in protecting my family. And I thought the way that I did that was by working as much as I did. Hence, I missed a lot of time with my family. By the time that I had been promoted to homicide, I write about the way that I tracked through the investigative bureaus and with Birmingham Police Department. I write a little bit about that in the book. But the night that this case came about, I was probably my marriage was failing. I was a terrible father. And, I had gone through a lot of trauma throughout the few years that I've been in homicide, and it was undiagnosed traumas just from being the type of person that I am. I'm a people person. I love people. I care a lot about people. I don't subscribe that everyone is bad. So I like to see the best in people. So, but being that type of person, I came so dedicated to the job that I wasn't, I just wasn't a very good husband. So the night that this case happened, I was coming off of closing a pretty big case within itself that and it didn't take me nearly as long as it did to solve that case as it did this case that we're talking about. But I was just closing the case. And I found myself sitting in my office. It's about 7 o'clock at night. It's probably about 6 o'clock in the afternoon. My wife is just getting off work. She calls me over the phone, and we're trying to, mend our relationship because we had been on a very rocky path for about, for some years there. So she calls me, and she's like, what do you want for dinner? And I tell her, she's like, good, I'm making us dinner so we can share a night together to try to start conversating and working on our marriage. And as I'm about to leave, I remember I have something else I needed to do at the office. So I'm thinking I'm just going to go right in the office, finish this up right quick, and then I'm going to leave and go home and sit with my kids and my wife and share some time with them. Well, 3.5 hours after that, my wife is at home. I'm still at the office, still working. It's now 10 o'clock. My kids are pretty much, it's their bedtime now. And I remember that, I was supposed to have dinner with my family, So make it back to the house. And, of course, my wife is upset. My kids are just itching to see me and spend some time with me. I spent a little time with them, and, my wife she's just kind of just done with it. She goes to bed, and, we go to bed, man, because I'm doing everything I can to avoid any type of discussion or confrontation or anything, just like most men, So I get into bed, and I can feel her like breathing, at the back of my neck. And now it's almost 11 o'clock at night, and I can laugh about this now. Me and my wife and I, we as I'm writing the book, I'm telling her, what I'm writing, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that night. You should put this in there." That's how the writing process.
Chris, let me ask you real quick: how old are you at this point? How long have you been married? How old are your kids, roughly?
Okay. So roughly, I'm probably in my early 30s. I got married very, very, very young. My wife was 18 years old. I was 20 years old when I got married. I hadn't been to college at that time, and we were about to have a kid. We were just out of high school, and that's the way things happen with us. And by the time this case happened, I was in my early 30s. She was right at 30 years old. My daughter at the time, I think, was maybe 10. And, my son was maybe 7 or 8 years old. So, these are my young kids.
Yeah. Real quick, because I want to get STS Nation involved here. Sherry's News writes, I need glasses now. Please don't beat yourself up, Sergeant Chris. You are not alone with dads working all the time and not spending time with their children and wife. I've had a couple nights like that with my wife too, where I try to stay as far over on the other side of the bed as I can. Patricia Burns, 6'5" of laser focused gentle giant is Chris Anderson. And followed here, I read that one. And then friend of the show, Jimmy C. Hi, SDS Nation, all-time favorite true crime show, Reasonable Doubt. Holla out, Chris Anderson, season 6, ? Okay, so let's pick it up there. So you missed this dinner. You're trying
Don't interrupt him anymore.
By the way, my lovely mother is a licensed marriage therapist, so this is a good one for her to tune into. Yeah, but
Okay, so we were that you are in bed.
Yes. So I'm in bed with my wife. I'm taking my shower and I'm laying down and I'm trying to go to sleep because I'm trying to avoid this, but I'm on call. After being in the bed for probably about 15 minutes, then it happens. I get the call from our dispatcher. They call me on my cell phone and tell me, hey, we have a homicide that we need you to come out on. And what I didn't mention, my son, well, you met my son. My son is a fan of the show, which he's probably watching this now.
Shout out to Chris Anderson Jr.
That's right. That's my boy CJ. And my daughter's name is Kayla. I have actually two daughters, but the daughter that I'm speaking of, her name is Kayla. She lives in the house with us. So at any rate, I get the call. I head out to the location. And as I'm there, it's really eerie because on the way there, I'm thinking about my family, thinking about the time that I missed with them. And, I'm figuring out, you need to go back and apologize to your wife because she didn't ask to be in this predicament. You made the choices to go to these units and serve in this capacity. So she didn't ask for this, but you're making her suffer through it. So these are the things that I'm saying to myself. And by the time I figure out, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to apologize. We're going to talk this thing out. I get to the crime scene and, because I'm missing the time with my kids also. So get to the crime scene and I remember the crime scene so vividly that I get out there and there are a bunch of young students, young college age kids that are just outside the crime scene and they're all bawling and crying. And the crime scene's been roped off, and the vehicle that's involved that's my actual crime scene is lodged up on a pile of bricks, and the gear is still moving. They hadn't been able to get the car shut off or anything like that. So I'm writing down notes and I'm thinking to myself, processing everything that I need to do before I go over to the crime scene and look into it. So after a few minutes, they get the car shut off and get it in a manner that is safe for us to really approach things. So I walk over to the lead officer and he's giving me a rundown of, the lay of the land. He's telling me we got so many witnesses over here and, we got the call at a certain amount of time, at this time of night. And I'm writing down notes. And then that's when I look over in the vehicle. And I see my victim, and she's just a young girl, young lady. She didn't, you can tell if a person has been out in the streets or was a person that had some sort of drug use background. This woman did not match any of those. She didn't belong in the set of circumstances that she was in. And as I'm looking at her and her eyes are still open and she's kind of looking up in the car and I see her eyes and I look at her and then I say, what's her name? And they tell me her name is Kayla. So from that moment on, I started seeing my own child in this vehicle, because my daughter's name is Kayla. This young lady is not that much older than my child. So I'm like, well, because I have to take a pause because these are flashes that happen with investigators sometimes. I could see my own child being in this vehicle and I immediately began to feel for the family. They'll never see their child again. And it's up to me to speak for her. And then another thing is, man, I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm missing my own kids. My kids are right here and I've not been here for them in years. So, I had to snap myself out of it and I began to focus again on what the task at hand. So this case takes a lot of different turns, but that's the night that I realized how much of a problem that I had. I started realizing that, questioning myself.
Hang on one sec. It's question time for Carm here.
No, you know what? I know it's a crazy comparison, but what was the name of that very famous quarterback who now lives here in Miami?
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. He also, he was so into his career that he let his wife go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was devastated.
After he couldn't retire from football. And
And
I
then
ran into
and
something similar myself because I was traveling 3 weeks out of every month for being a news reporter and had young kids and had to make a decision.
and the young wife.
And a young wife, yes. But had to make that decision. But let me ask you a question. So when you are called to a homicide scene, what do they tell you? Did you know this was going to be a young woman? What did you know before getting on scene? You just knew it was a homicide. Did you know how many people were involved? Anything of that nature?
No. So dispatchers have basic information when we are called out, and they'll tell you we have a victim that's inside of a vehicle. The vehicle, I remember them saying that the vehicle's tires were still engaged. And I remember them telling me the location. So that's about all of the information I had. Everything else you'll find out once you get there on the crime scene.
And you, so you pull up, you see the tires are still rotating. And was it just this one victim, Kayla? Was there any other? That was it. And it was a shooting.
No, it was a shooting. Well, we learned it later, but yeah, it was a shooting. And what we learned later was that she was the victim of an attempted carjacking. And I'll give you this. She was parked. Remember back in the in the when we first started getting cell phones and people were using them, and they would tell you if you got to use your cell phone, pull over into a well-lit area, use your cell phone there. And that's exactly what she did. She was doing exactly what she was supposed to do. She pulled into a wide open parking lot for a school. It was very well lit. And it was just off of her college campus because she went to a local college here in Alabama, in Birmingham. And she was doing exactly what she was supposed to do in order to follow the law. And she lost her life behind it. As in a homicide, working cases like I did in homicide, you don't have, I try to be sensitive when I say this. Sometimes people will indulge themselves in activities where they are more likely to lose their lives. But then you have some cases that you have a completely innocent victim. We didn't have that many of those cases, the completely innocent victims. And Kayla was a completely innocent person, and she lost her life.
She was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna keep trying to get some comments. And Andy School writes, Joel and Carm, congratulations on landing the Chris Anderson. I enjoyed him in First 48. His newer show I watch regularly. His chairside manner, exemplary. Can't wait to read your book. You can get The Case on Amazon right now. This comment makes me laugh just the way it's written. Northern Ireland Nincompoop is the name. Joel, you are the spit out of your mom's mouth. No disrespect. In Ireland, that just means you look so alike, which is funny. So you missed this dinner, and now you showered. You're getting ready to go to bed. You go to sleep, I guess. You're dealing with a crisis at work. A young woman named Kayla is dead. You don't know why, how she was shot, and your wife is not happy with you.
Absolutely not.
I guess your kids are maybe not that happy with you either. So you're in this struggle. What's day 2 look like? It's kind of like the first 48.
Oh yeah. So day 2, I was still at work. We spent almost we rode for about 36 hours straight on this case, following up leads, trying to drum up information. Because like they said, on the first 48, they always tell you that the first 48 hours are the most important. You lose it, you are almost 50%, almost 60% less likely to solve that case if you don't have a lead within the first 48 hours. So we rode and talked to people and pushed on this case for 36 hours straight. And we were just going door to door, knocking on, talking to people, trying to obtain video evidence, talking to Kayla's mom. And what ended up happening was Kayla was just so happened to be on the phone with a friend of hers who was in Auburn. Auburn is, I don't know if you know anything. Auburn, he was in Auburn, Alabama, where University of Auburn is. when this actually happened, and I didn't know that at the time. He was my first suspect, honestly, because I had to clear him of anything before I could move on to anyone else. And I won't call him a suspect. He was a person of interest. I thought that he may have had something to do with it, because it's just strange. You're there on the phone with someone when they were murdered. So, you've got to clear that up as an investigator. So I called him, got him on the phone, and we talked for about 15 to 20 minutes over the phone. And he says, well, detective, listen, I'm on my way back to Birmingham now. I'll be at your office in about 2.5 hours. Now, the homicide happened at about 11 to 12 o'clock, I want to say. But so he comes back to Birmingham. He shows up at my office about 6 o'clock that following morning. And after I talked to him, his story was pretty believable, but I didn't want to do anything. I didn't clear him until after I got physical evidence that proved that he was nowhere near the crime scene when the murder happened. So, and that was the only real lead that I had initially in the case. And now that was gone. So, after talking to all of the students that were there, just so happened to find out Kayla was at a party that night, and there was nothing that happened at the party that would lead them to believe that anyone at the party had anything to do with her homicide. Which that was another lead that I had to, clear up before I could move on in the case. So that's the reason why it took me almost 36 hours to go back home, because for those 36 hours I was at work the entire time, me and my partner. So yeah, we
in that period of time, did you get a call from the wife or anything asking how you were, or did you feel the coldness?
No, and I don't think that it was the coldness. I think that she had become so numb to me leaving out, knowing when I get these calls, it's probably going to be some time before I make it back home. She knew how I work. She knew even if she did call, I probably would have to send it to voicemail if I'm in an interview or something like that. But I just tried to, she knew that I had to stay focused on what I was doing. And that was that was her ultimate goal. She didn't want to make, unless it was an absolute emergency, she didn't want to take my focus away from what I was doing.
So that's thoughtful.
That is, absolutely.
Yeah, Jody Johnson writes, oh no, I'm 50 minutes late from Virginia here. I'll take this over the red carpet and Oscars any day. Screw the Oscars. I hate the Oscars. You know who's missing the Oscars?
No,
this one loves the Oscars.
I do not miss it.
She'll
because
catch the Oscars.
It's so long that
you'll still see it by the time.
I really am. This is very good for the pre-Oscars.
Patricia writes, my twin sister is named Kayla. Allie Snow writes, this is an amazing story and it's only the beginning. And look at this. My Knit Saloon. Can you please read the first 3 rows or so from your book, Chris? I think that means first 3 sentences. You want to read the first paragraph to us, Chris?
So
that's a great idea.
It is a great idea.
The first paragraph. So okay. So I'll read it from chapter 1, because I don't start the book talking about this actual case. I actually started talking about my background. And I take the readers on how I process or how I moved through the detective bureau and how each bureau affected me in my marriage. So chapter 1, being a homicide detective with the Birmingham Police Department was the most challenging experience I ever had as a cop. In homicide, you're tasked in every case to bring those responsible to justice. You're also responsible for making sure that the right person is prosecuted for their crime. For most of my career, that's what I chose to do. After 22 years as a cop, with 17 of those years as an investigator, I realized that law enforcement was much more than a job for me. It was my ministry. And like any ministry, some people become so caught up in their work that they forget the most important things: marriage, family, enjoying life, and the short time that you have on earth. That's the first 2 paragraphs.
Beautiful paragraph.
Carm, I would like to ask you, she is, as I said, a retired marriage therapist. What about this push and pull with married couples, and it could be very well in today's world, the woman working much more than the man. What advice do you have for couples who are struggling with the fact that one or both spouses is working too much and leaving too much responsibility with the kids on the other spouse? Any advice?
Well, ideally, in most jobs, there are certain jobs that you cannot sort of set limits, because when a homicide comes in, you have to go. But in most jobs, you have to learn to kind of pace yourself. And during COVID, bad as COVID was, it taught people that they will survive without going in the office and working till 8 or 9 at night.
I heard a rabbi during the height of the pandemic, it was very inspirational, saying it was the great reset. It allowed people to reset their lives and figure out their priorities. And he was trying to see the good and all the bad with the pandemic.
But on the other hand, like my son-in-law, sometimes he comes home very late because he does angioplasties, heart specialist. And if somebody comes into the emergency room, he has to do it because he's on call. Right. And he cannot just, go home. And my daughter is very accepting of that.
Chris, everyone in my family is a doctor except for me. So that's why I wear my black sheep t-shirt, which I should have worn tonight.
It's not about you.
LBC, we're getting back to Chris right now. Very big fan of all three of you.
Chris,
thank you. I know you didn't hear that enough.
Where we got interrupted. We got interrupted. She went to the party. She didn't do anything crazy. And that's where you talk to her friends.
And you're 36 hours into this now. And by the way, here's if you guys have questions like these, please throw them our way. HK wants to know, Chris, what kind of car was she in? Because you are looking at every detail.
Absolutely. She was in a two-door BMW. I can't remember the exact year, but it was a pretty new BMW that her father had purchased for her during her graduation. Because look, during this time, I really got to figure out who this young lady was. And she is, and I describe her in the book, and I think the best line to describe her is that she is the type of person or the type of child that every father wants to raise. She made good grades. She always volunteered. She always worked to help out others. She volunteered for a lot at her school. She volunteered to help her grandparents. Every morning she would stop by their houses to do things like take trash out, make sure that their bills are paid, make sure that everything is working well in their homes. She's just she was a wonderful, 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 amazing person. And I hate that when I was introduced to her, I had to be introduced to her under the circumstances that we had. But there was someone that I met during this investigation that not only, helped me as become a better investigator, but she helped me out as, in becoming a better man. And that was Kayla's mother. And I write a lot about her in the book.
And how soon into the investigation do you meet Kayla's mother? What is her name? And I assume you guys are still in contact today?
Yes, we are. Her name is Robin. And Robin and I and Kayla's brother, we lost contact a little bit after COVID. But recently, when I told them that I was about to dive into this book, they gave me their blessings for it, and she was pretty happy about it. And I find I opened up and was transparent about how much she helped me as a husband, because I met her probably 5 or 10 hours into the investigation. After I had I brought all the kids that were at the party with Kayla down to my office and spoke with them. And of course, her friend that she was on the phone with, he was down there. And I noticed, I didn't know who she was, but she was sitting down at the front of in our police lobby. And I asked her, could I help her? And she was like, yes, my daughter is Kayla. And I need to speak to the investigator that's working her case. So I bring her upstairs, and I had already been out over and talked with her brother and her father, but I never spoke with the mother because they were separated at the time. So I bring her upstairs, and then she really, just tells me who Kayla was and the type of person that she was. And it was bad to hear that this beautiful woman, this beautiful soul, had lost her life and she was a completely innocent victim.
Let me ask you, did she, at the point where you saw her that evening, she already knew that Kayla had passed, or do you sure? And how? I mean, how was she reacting to all that in that immediate moment?
I mean, she was broken. She was extremely broken. But they only addressed that the night that it happened. I went and made the death notification to Kayla's father, which he already knew because, like I said, the friend was on the phone with her, and he had already called the brother and Kayla's brother, Matthew. And Matthew had come down to the crime scene, and by the time he got down there, I had already left with all of the students that were, there on the scene. So he just didn't know. Look, I've been on the other side of a homicide investigation, and I know how things happen. They happen very, very quick. You are way out of your anything that you've ever experienced in your life. You don't know where to go. You don't know who to talk to. So he finally went back to his house. I went over to his house and spoke with he and his father, and they went and called Kayla's mother, who then came down to my building and spoke with me.
Is that the hardest part of the job, the death notification for families? And how do you do it? Is it like you see on TV? I mean, how do you do it? How do you approach it?
It is the hardest portion of any homicide case. Telling a person that their loved one will no longer be home, or that you're never going to see your loved one again, is the absolute hardest thing I have had to do in my career. And I hated every one of them, but I wanted to make sure that I was the one that went to these families' houses, because I would be the one that was speaking for their loved one. So yeah, it was the absolute hardest. And I don't know how I managed it. I just figured out a way to manage it. Sometimes, look, I'm the type of person, like, we'll have most homicide detectives. This is something that I hear a lot, heard it a lot when I was working on Reasonable Doubt. I heard it a lot when I was working cold cases. The detectives came over to my house and they were so stoic. They acted like they didn't care. Well, a lot of times as an investigator, you have to detach yourself from the emotions within the case, because that's the way you stay focused. If you attach yourself emotionally to a case, sometimes some people will miss something. And for me, it was different. I couldn't detach myself from the emotion. There were plenty of times, even with Kayla's case, there were plenty of times that she and I would sit there and I'm having to console her and wipe my own eyes because I'm crying, because I hate to see anyone in pain. And my my victims' families, they were in pain losing their loved one.
Well, by the way, just to lighten it up for a quick moment, Judy Sullivan, who in their right mind watches the Oscars now? It's a great question. To screw the Oscars, from H.K. Schubert, to no red carpet this year, and then to this kind. I love STS. Future writes, the Oscars are on? Question mark. Oh well. Okay, so Kayla is shot and killed. 36 hours go by. The family finds out. They're obviously devastated. Carm, you have a question? You're raising that thing.
I am trying to visualize. You went into this parking lot and you saw her in the driver's seat, sort of like, I'm comparing it to the Markel case, okay? Like leaning over the steering wheel, right?
Right. So she
was she shot through the door, or was she shot?
She was shot through the window. It went the projectile, the bullet went straight through the window, and it struck her in the back of her neck area, in the back of her head.
So she didn't suffer too long.
No, she didn't.
So let me ask something. If this was an attempted carjacking, I mean, did it make sense that they didn't take the car? Did they shoot, you think? And then they said, "Oh crap,
There was
and then
blood and broken glass, and
so they committed a crime maybe they didn't anticipate committing, and they just took off.
Right.
they
I think
must have been
that
high or something too.
it's very possible. We get into the suspects a lot in the book. I talk a lot about them also.
Lou Jones wants to know the name of the book. The name of the book is The Case. She came in late, or Lou, he came in late. The name of the book is The Case. Baby Doll. Hey, y'all. Chris Anderson. And my favorite name on this show, Shaquille Oatmeal.
Shaquille Oatmeal.
He says hello. So okay, so let's keep the story going here. You're more than 36 hours in, and no leads. You thought you had maybe someone from the party. That was a no-go. You interview all the party goers. She's alone in this parking lot that's well lit. Pick it up from there, Chris.
So we go into the case. I had done everything that I could possibly do in those first 36 hours, and everything goes cold. Everything goes cold. I don't have any more leads to follow up on. So I get myself together and I decide that I'm going to go home. I pack up my stuff, put my case file together, and I remember that my daughter had a basketball game that day. Mm. So, and I didn't remember it until after, I was getting ready to leave. It's almost, we're deep in the case now, but I grab my stuff, jump in my car, turn on my license sirens, and I push it on over to my daughter's basketball game. I get there, it's towards the end of the game, and I go over and sit down with my wife, and she is still, she's still and I just can't talk to you right now, Chris. I want to enjoy my daughter's game. I want to enjoy the environment, and we're not talking. So at any rate, I go over and sit down. My son comes and jumps on my neck, and the game is almost over. And, my daughter has an excellent game. Kayla has an excellent game. We're getting ready to leave, and mom is doing her mom thing. Okay, Kayla, you need to go get your stuff together. We're gonna go grab something to eat, and we'll all go home. So she knows I've been out for the time frame that I have been out, and she tells me, look, I'm gonna take them to go get some food. They'll be out of the house for maybe an hour. They'll give you enough time. That's all I can give you, because I know you're tired. I know you hadn't slept. Get you an hour, because when they come back, I know what they're going to do. They're going to want to spend some time with their father. So, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get some rest. And she told me that she had left the food from the day before, in the refrigerator. I could go and heat it up if I wanted to eat or whatever. So go home, take a shower, and I start eating my food, and I pass out asleep. So a few minutes later, I hear my kids running in. My son does exactly what he does every time. He runs over, jumps on his dad, and he wants to talk, and then Kayla comes over and give me a kiss or whatever, and she's like, you can give him a bath if you want to, and put him in the bed. So I take him upstairs, talk to my son, talk to my daughter for a little while, put my son in the tub, and I talk to my daughter, because now I'm just, I'm just trying to spend as much time as I can with them. Mm-hmm. And, I put my son in the bed, and about an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I come back downstairs, and I see my wife, and she's in my case file. Mm.
In his case file,
she's looking at the case. She's seen it. It's been all over the news. And she says, "Is this what you got called out on?" And I'm tired and I'm kind of frustrated. And I said something that I didn't need to say. Which, in order to find out, you'll have to read the book.
The case.
Yeah, so it automatically starts an argument. A huge, it just blows up. We get to a point, and we have this huge argument, and my kids hear us arguing and they come downstairs, and that's something that we didn't do. We didn't have arguments like this. So I knew it was a lot more to it than just me being absent. There was a lot more frustration between the two of us. And, and I see my kids, they're crying and they're watching, their parents who they've rarely even seen us have a deep discussion. With an argument, they're just crying. So I think I need to leave, I need to get out of here. So I grab all my stuff, grab my case file, and I leave and go to the one place where I can always get a good night's sleep.
To the office.
To the police department.
That's exactly right.
Do you have a bed there?
Exactly right.
Do you have a couch?
Yeah. So we had a couch there that was I had learned to sleep on that couch. It was a certain way that you had to lay on it because there are springs and stuff that were popping out. And if you laid on it the wrong way, on the wrong side, you get poked. But if you knew how to do it, you could sleep on that couch. So yeah, I had plenty of nights on that particular couch. And I always kept a toothbrush and some soap or something I can wash myself and clean myself up.
Now, Chris, do you think that a big part of this argument breaking out was your own guilt over the fact that you were so involved with your work and you knew that you were neglecting your family and you didn't know how to channel it? So
no, he's exhausted at this point. He's exhausted.
But because I know if my
that's
wife,
the reason he snaps.
If my wife went through my case file, I would snap at her too. But deep down, did you know that it was your own sort of guilt about being so obsessed with your work?
Absolutely, I knew it was all on me. I take full responsibility for it because I even talk about it. Look, I was a 30-plus-year-old guy. The older me would have, the me that I am today would have sat down, listened to what she was saying, and tried to figure out a solution. The younger me would have done exactly what I did, and that was the wrong way to approach any type of problem in your marriage.
And Carm, you have a question. And also, go ahead. Carm.
No, the thing is that it's maybe sequentially, it's not where I should butt in at this level, because first of all, you cannot tell us how you found the criminals because that's like we have to read it in the book. Okay, so that would be a spoiler if you told us. But there is a different subject that I want to mention. You are now working on a book that the title is Men, You Are Crazy, which ties in with your relationship with your family and everything else.
Absolutely.
And do you want to talk about that book? Do you want to? Because you didn't publish it yet, but it's in the
This
works.
is classic Carm, taking us off of our subject matter, producing the show.
You told me Sunday nights I can bring to the table.
I will produce this, Carmela, and we will get to that.
The boy feels threatened.
We will get to that. We'll get to that at the end. Let's get through. I don't want to confuse everyone.
No,
here.
But we are not confusing
Catherine
anybody.
Stephan, this is important. She says, "Love listening to you read, Chris. I really hope you do an audiobook. Is there going to be an audiobook?"
There will be.
And this one, Sherry, if this is cracking you up, if you were around my house, you would not be able to speak after or stand. You'd be doubled over. Carm, you crack me up. Joel, it's not about you. That's just one thing he says to me. Baby doll, I'm the black sheep of my family. It's fine. It's really not baby doll, but
he's the gray sheep.
And look at this comment here from Sherry's News. Kaylee was an angel on earth. God wanted her home. So Chris, and by the way, Judy, thank you. Please do this. Hit the like button. It'll help get this promoted. It'll help sell books for Chris, get the word out there. And I love this. STS greater than the Oscars. Shout out to a friend of the show, Ketchup. Appreciate that. Okay, so you're sleeping on the couch in the police department. You're trying to get comfortable. You're avoiding the family, and what happens next?
So the next thing I do is I start going back over. I go back over my case file, And now that and I'm prefacing everything, guys. So you'll have to get the full scope of what happened and how things happen. You'll have to read the book. We go back through, and now I need to start drumming up more leads because I don't have anything else that we could dive into. So we start trying to. We've been getting pretty good media coverage, but now I need to give a full-fledged press conference and try to drum up more leads because everything that I've worked on was done. So,
and was there any video surveillance in the parking lot? Nothing. So when you exhaust all possible leads, you turn to the media for some help.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no better partnership in solving crimes than law enforcement and the people that they serve. There's no greater partnership. So I believe that, there are things that you need to keep close to the vest when you're early on in the investigation. But when you run out of leads, you absolutely need to go and pull in that sixth man, that extra partner that you have, and those are the people that you serve.
Okay, so how does that work? You start putting out a press release saying we're going to have a news conference, and then what do you ask the public for help with?
So I asked the public for help with number one. I bring back in Kayla's mother because she's been so instrumental in helping me understand who Kayla was. So I bring her in, ask her to be there with us while we're doing the press conference, and my chief of police, and of course the mayor's office, and we put out a press release to all of our local news, and we just tell them what we have and what we're looking for. So yeah, and we have the press conference, and that's when you start. Now, press conferences can cut both ways. Sometimes you'll get leads that will help your investigation, and sometimes you'll get leads that will not help you at all. So we start getting phone calls from people that are psychics. That was one thing that we got, and they're giving information as if they're witnesses and things of that nature. And as an investigator, as a homicide investigator, you have to vet all of those leads. So what it actually did was I had to put together another team of investigators that were helping us out. And plus, we got a lot of help and support from the FBI during this investigation, U.S. Marshals, ATF. We had all of our federal partners that were a part of this investigation. But, and I just had to figure out who can vet these leads. And we got thousands of, I won't say thousands, but we got hundreds of leads from those press conferences.
Well, the size of the bullets should determine what kind of a gun it was, right?
Were you able to match the ballistics and all that? Real quick, love your t-shirt, Chris. Delicious coffee, criminal coffee. Followed by LBC Robinson, interesting comment here. Watched you for years, Chris. You were always one of my favorite people in the show. And I'm a 90 LAPD inner city youth. I don't like the police, but you like Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson. So
Thank you, LBC Rob.
Yeah. So where were we just now?
We were
Where
at the
were
press
we
conference.
now?
We were at the press conference.
Okay, press conference. So there's a lot of psychics, a lot of stuff. Does anything come out of that that's remotely helpful?
Nothing at all, except for more requests to do more interviews. And I did a lot of them. My supervisors did a lot of them. I ended up going on another a very well-known, nationally known show during that time. And being on, I won't say her name, but being on her show brought even more people that were, with a lot of claims that didn't help the investigation.
And where are we? How many days in are we right now when you have this press conference?
Oh, man. So we are probably, we're not even a full 2 days in now. Yeah. So, and that's kind of early for me to do a press conference, but I just ran out of leads because we ran on everything else that we had.
And let me ask you this: at this point in real life, in reality, are you making this whole connect? Because obviously you wrote the book because you had some time to reflect. But in real life, were you starting to connect this this victim has the same name as my daughter. Things aren't going right in my marriage. All of a sudden, I'm meeting this mother. She's like very reasonable. Like, are these things all starting to play out in real time in your head that there's a lot going on in my life that needs fixing on top of just solving this case?
Absolutely. And I can't remember exactly where it was in the book that I wrote this, but after I interviewed Kayla's mom, and here's when I really, really realized how bad off I was. I bring her back over into my little area where my desk is, and in my desk area, I have pictures of my kids and my wife and everybody that, family portraits and stuff like that, family photos and things of that nature. And when she comes over and she's looking at the pictures of my family and she's like, "Oh, your wife is beautiful. What's her name?" This is a woman who's just lost her child. She's asking about my family. So that lets you know how much of how caring of a person she is. And she asks my daughter's name, and I tell her, her name is Kayla. And she says she's so beautiful, and she immediately starts crying. So I have some tissues, I hand them to her, and she says, "Why are you still here? This is day 2." She says, "Why are you still here at the office? You need to go home. You need to hug your family, because I would give anything to just hug my child again."
Wow.
This is powerful as hell.
It's coming from a Holocaust survivor saying this is powerful. Right. You better buy. Judy writes, "The world needs more people like Chris Anderson. I'm buying his book tonight," followed by, "I buy the book of all your guests." This is from Blooming Rose. "They are just amazing. Big hug to Chris, and thank you for all you did and do." Thank you. Please buy this book. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Can I just say one
Yes,
thing?
you can. Chris Bacon writes, "We need more people like Chris."
Anxious on this evening in this podcast, but I'm anxious. I'm worried. Don't tell us who the killer was. I want to buy the book, and I want to discover it in the book.
We will leave some suspense here.
Don't do that.
Marie Comer writes, "Please make your book an Audible book. I'm from Birmingham. Thank you for your service. Have worked in law enforcement. Have a son-in-law currently in law enforcement." Followed by Courtney. But she just became a YouTube member. Someone said to me, "Hey, what does being a YouTube member means?" And I don't know. I got to get my wife back to you on that, because I don't even know. But become one. That's all I know. Followed by Florida here. Okay. So this is not just a story about solving a crime. This is about trying to solve one's own life. And it's interesting because it's not about me, Carm, but I've been there myself. I had to reevaluate my whole life back in 2018 when I had 3 kids and I was traveling 3 weeks out of every month, basically. And it wasn't travel that I was expecting. It was news travel. So, Chris, pick it back up. 6'5" on a couch. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is not easy.
It is not.
Real quick, when will your book be available on Audible? Do we know?
It is coming up now. I'm working on it now. I got a couple of other things that I need to get done. Look, most of this stuff, it's not like I don't have a huge team or anything like that. It's just me and my partner, my publisher. She's a she has people that works for her, but it's really, she and I are doing this on our own, trying to get it all together. So, and plus with my busy schedule, man, I'm still working. I'm just trying to get all of it done, but I can guarantee you I'll have it up on Audible very, 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 very soon.
And Chris, right before you get cracking again, I want to ask my therapist mother. So Chris and his wife, can we have her first name? What's your wife's first name?
Anitra, Anitra, Anitra.
Anitra. So Anitra and Chris met when they were basically, were you high school sweethearts?
Yes, we were.
Okay, high school sweethearts. So the dynamic, that's a very deep love. That's a first love. Does this make it extra special in your eyes, Carmela, or extra complicated or complex?
No, I mean, I was 22 when I got married. I met my husband and went out with him from the age of 20. For me, it's not so shocking as these modern people who get married late.
I got married way too young at 41.
Yeah, it was very funny when he was. I have to tell you this because this is funny. The day of his wedding, he comes to me and says, "Am I old enough to get married?"
I wasted my youth on marriage. Okay, it's not about me.
No. It is. You know what? Love and getting together is the biggest mystery of the world to me.
Right.
People get wiser with age. I never discovered what makes this happen. But when two people like soulmates,
Yeah.
I think it happened to me with my husband. Maybe it didn't happen to him with me, but it definitely happened with me with him. I feel it was a beautiful life, even though it was totally not a smooth life. There were bumps on the road, and I feel that you worked it out. As it happens, I went on Google and I saw your wife. She happens to be a beautiful woman.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Look at her. She's a detective. She's a detective.
No, right.
I have to get answers on that book that he's working on.
So, so now it hits home in a heavy way because you are trying to solve a homicide, and the victim's mother says to you, "Why are you not home with your family? You only, you have so much time with your family on this earth. I'd give anything to be with my family." And this is coming from the victim's mother. So how does that hit you?
Yeah. And it hits me hard. It hits me like a ton of bricks, because here's a woman her world has been destroyed. I couldn't imagine losing one of my kids. I couldn't imagine losing any of my children, man. And here it is. And we're pretty relatively fresh in the investigation. And she's telling me, you need to take a break and you need to go and see your family. But she's like that, now that it took me I can't even remember how long I worked that case, but this was not a first 48 case. This was a case that took me months. It took me months to solve. But here's a woman that pretty fresh in the investigation, is extending grace, but she did that throughout the entire investigation, even extending grace to the people who were responsible for murdering her daughter.
I'm sitting here and thinking, how the heck did he solve it? There were no, how did his, I can't wait to read the book.
Yeah, well, I'm curious about that too. So you literally, there's no video. There's no witnesses, right? So
this is the definition of what most homicide investigators will call a whodunit case. Whodunit cases, you'll hear that term a lot, and most the only people that really understand it is either police families, law enforcement officers who's worked homicide cases, or if you've watched a couple of different episodes where they used it and explained it on First 48. Whodunit cases, you have absolutely nothing. I mean, no evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, no real witnesses, which I had a witness, but he couldn't identify anybody. So you have nothing. So we call those cases whodunits. Whodunit cases, the majority of the time, don't get solved.
Wow. Real quick, Felita Dickerson, right? Stopped here. I'll let you stop here because of Chris. I lived in Birmingham when he was on Birmingham PD. Congratulations on your success, Carm. What were you gonna?
Can I just share my fantasy with you? Don't respond. Put on a poker face. My fantasy is that actually, in the end, the criminal himself, either he was arrested and confessed, or he squealed to somebody in jail, or that's how you found it. There is no other way that in my own, maybe if I sleep on it tonight, tomorrow I'll come up with another variation. But I would like to, while Joel doesn't want me to do this, but I want to do it. I want you to talk about this book because it's also very important. This is like a little break. you are working on a book that says, "Man, you are crazy," and it relates to the fact how you cannot, people in
I'm good with it. I'm
police
good with it.
work, right?
She won't
Right.
let go, Chris. She won't let
Yeah.
go.
I
She's a
am
pit
not
bull.
one of those who lets go.
She's a pit bull. She
I
will not
don't-
let go. So
no,
tell us, man,
no,
you are.
because I see the connection between
Look at
Right.
you
what
should hire her
happened.
as an agent. She's already selling your next book. It's called "Man, You Are Crazy." So what is that about in a few sentences?
No, but it relates to the fact that he had issues with his family, and it's a taboo. It's not permitted in certain circles, in many
Mhm.
circles.
That's right.
Go ahead, take it
Carl,
from here.
Mom Carr, you are absolutely right. I am working. My next book will be out later this
Fall.
back in fall of this year. It is called "Man, You Are Crazy," and we deal with an issue that is almost never spoken about in law enforcement, especially, and that's the PTSD that is involved in law enforcement. A lot of officers, like the years that I spent in homicide, because I spent most of my investigative years in homicide, and in a city like Birmingham, where you're working over 100 homicides a year, and it's only 10 or 12 investigators, you see death a lot. And each time you go on these traumatic scenes and go to these areas and make these death notifications, it does something to your psyche. And in most cases, most investigative trainers tell you, don't take your work home with you. Well, that is probably the worst bit of advice that you could give anyone, because what that does is you store that trauma into your heads, and then it ends up coming out in other ways. You start drinking. A lot of law enforcement officers try to commit suicide or commit suicide. You turn it to drugs. And I'm just speaking specifically for my profession, and that's in law enforcement. So myself and my co-author, we both work to normalize the word crazy, because in some way, shape, or form, we all are just a little bit crazy. And the only way that we can make others that need the help feel comfortable in getting that help is by normalizing the word.
And right here is a
And
comment from
getting-
Andy's school. Chris, how do those of us who've done so many death notices, all to families where their kids lived a lifestyle that led to this possible outcome, how do you handle the memories? I have trouble. I assume Andy's school is a retired homicide detective. I mean, you talked about the trauma early on. Did you get help for it? Have you been diagnosed with like PTSD? Are you able to share anything along those lines? And I guess, how are you dealing with it still? Because you've seen things that people haven't seen.
Right. So, yeah, I did not seek help for the PTSD and the trauma that I went to until years after I left homicide. I knew something was wrong. I knew I had been through a lot of traumatic experiences during my career as an investigator and as a police officer, that it just went undiagnosed, because I was just, I was one of those guys that felt like I could handle it on my own. And that is the wrong way to handle any type of trauma. You need to talk to people, and it doesn't have to be you talk to your go see a doctor. Even though I would suggest going to see a doctor, but you could talk to your family also. And that was one of the problems that was happening in my marriage, because I never talked about my cases, and that was one of the reasons why I was upset with my wife the day that she picked up my case file.
Why didn't you do you just wanted to keep work and family separate?
I thought that I could. I thought that I could. And I didn't realize, the things that I was doing, especially early on when I started in homicide, because when you read Man, You Are Crazy, the stories I talk about in Man, You Are Crazy happened before this case happened. So those investigations predate the case.
Well, this is when it came to a head, so to speak.
Right.
The
Yeah.
crisis in
Absolutely.
the marriage, in in the book, I think what is important to know is that in many areas, especially in police work and so forth, they expect you to be the strong, silent type, and it's considered like firemen and
all the first responders.
Yeah, they're all
EMS.
called first responders. I even wrote down first line responding people.
Yeah.
They don't know how to ask for help and open up.
And the irony is that they're helping everyone else, right?
They help everybody else, but they don't help themselves. And it's a very important book that you will write. But right now we are going to read the one.
We're going back to the case. Meanwhile,
case.
Dennis Long, to take us off track once again, writes, Chris, are you going to write any books about the cases you investigated on the first 48? This guy's going to become Shakespeare now.
You know, I have plenty of cases that I can write about that weren't featured on the first 48. The case that I write about in my book, The Case, was not featured on the first 48. I have several other cases that I would love to talk about and how they impacted me as an investigator.
And we've got a VIP comment here, right here. And I'm glad I caught this. Deborah Patterson writes, I am Kayla's aunt. Her mom is my sister. Thank you for all you did in Kayla's case. I want a signed copy of the book. Deborah definitely deserves a signed copy of the book. Shout out to Deborah Patterson for hopping on here. Really appreciate you being here. So sorry for your loss. And so
thank you, Deborah.
Yeah. Just gave me the chills, actually. Frankie Figs writes, Carm is so insightful. Until she's your
don't say that to Joel.
Until she's your mother 24 hours a day. Then it gets a little much.
Annoying.
Look at this. Another one. This probably puts me down at the end. Sheila Brennan, absolutely appreciate Carm's insightful questions and comments. Joel, hope you know how fortunate you are to have such an amazing mother, and I appreciate her. I am.
We do this Sunday.
Sunday night's the worst day for me.
I only do podcasts now. I'm partially unemployed now, retired, and we only do it Sunday nights. And he's so used to running the show by himself, he cannot tolerate me being here.
Courtney writes, Joel, we appreciate you. Thank you for bringing the best guests. This is my #1 channel. Thank you. Hit the like button, please do that. Okay, so this grieving mother, Deborah's sister, Kayla's mother, is absolutely devastated, and she takes the time in all of her own tragedy to say, you better take care of your own family. And how does that strike you? Does it even strike you at that moment? Do you say, hey, I better get home, I better get my ass off this couch and go make up with my wife? Or do you say, I'm too invested in my case still, and you ignore everything? Or how does it?
No, I won't say that I was, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because she was absolutely right. I had been at this now, I mean, and for her particular case, it had only been, 48 hours, maybe, we were pretty early in the investigation during that time. But I had been doing the exact same thing that I was doing, during that time for years now. So for her, it was 48 hours. For my wife, it had been years. So I decided that, I needed to change how I was doing things. I needed to really sit down with her, let her know about some of the things that was happening, because Kayla's case hit me so hard that there would be times, I would be sitting down, and I would still see her face, or I would see my daughter's face every time I went back and looked through the crime scene photos. Or if I'm going back to the vehicle and we're pulling some evidence from the car, I could still see Kayla's face or my daughter's own face. And I realized that, I needed to change what I was doing and how I was operating. If I'm going to be a better father, if I'm going to be a better husband, I had to change it. And it was, I credit a lot of that to Robin and how she responded to me as her investigator and as her friend, because we are still good friends today. I consider her a friend.
So how many years ago was this case roughly?
Oh wow, I think this case happened in 2007, 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I say
You can.
something?
It's your show, Carm. You can say
No,
whatever
in
you
my
want.
show, if I say something, you say it's your show. Anyway, you know, I did mental health stuff, and I was married. I'm married to a psychiatrist. Okay, so we sometimes even worked together. The introduction to what I'm going to say now, I have this feeling that for you to become a cold-blooded, detached completely person, it was a bigger challenge because you're a very warm, caring person.
Absolutely.
So,
Go ahead, Carm. I'm sorry.
so that's
You were kind of going. I think she's saying you were going against your grain because by nature you're very.
yes.
Well, let me just get a couple comments in. Queen Tiffany writes, "Hi, Ms. Carm. My first time seeing her live and not as a cardboard cutout. She does exist. Where's this next?
Still not for a long time.
I like this other one, and this one here says, Chris, you will become the next Hemingway. I'm not sure if that's what he wants, but he will. And then
Right.
on
No,
to
not
Carolyn from
Hemingway.
California. Joel and Carm, SGS always has the best and most interesting guests. It's not just a tagline, it is who we are. Here's this question, Chris. This is a great way to pivot and go a little bit longer, and then we're not going to give up the whole book, but your mom's cat writes, what did you teach your children, especially Kayla, about how to stay safe in college? What did you? I mean, that's an important issue. I
Yes,
thought
Absolutely.
it's very good.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have?
So, the number one thing is always travel in groups, especially for young girls. Always travel in groups and make sure the group that you're traveling with are people that you truly, truly trust to, hold you accountable for some of the things that you do. If you go to a party and you drink too much, either you be that person that is willing to leave that party, take your friend home, or let that person sleep in your room, or you make sure that you're with people that can hold you accountable for some of the things, or you are holding them accountable for some of the things that you do in college. And to make my daughter went to the same college that Kayla was going to. She graduated from that college, and so I offered her a lot, and the college never had anything to they weren't responsible in any way, shape, or form. This was a group of men that committed the most heinous crime in society, and you'll have to read more about the story to find out what happened. So I offer a lot of advice to kids in college.
How just back to the case for me, I got a couple of more questions and we'll wrap her up. But back to this notion of a whodunit case where you don't have surveillance, you don't have witnesses, you really have nothing. How do you stay focused on it? I mean, it's literally like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, right? Like there's no one, nothing. So how, after the first 48, so to speak, are you still working this case nonstop? And what are you trying to like, how can you pull something out of nothing, I guess is my question.
So, look, I've always been the investigator that believes I would rather be lucky than good any day. And I was a decent investigator, but a lot of cases, I just count it up as luck. And whenever I've completely investigated a case that, I don't have any more leads, I usually start back over at the beginning, because 90% of the time you've forgotten something, you've missed something, or that was something that you were supposed to do that you didn't do it. I restarted this case about 3 times. I mean, just completely going back over from the beginning, going through all of the information, going back through any lineups, anybody that I spoke with, going back and re-interviewing anyone that saw her that day, going back and looking at some of those leads that we got during the press conferences, making sure that all of those were vetted. Yeah, I did it about 3 times until I finally got the lead that I needed.
Catherine Stefan writes, Chris, if your book is half as good as you're telling the story, it will be a bestseller. This is an important question from Nightwood. Is it difficult for law enforcement to seek therapists? Is it hard to get the help, Chris?
It's not hard. It is hard for officers to go and seek out the help that they need. It's not hard. I mean, because there's more help available now for any profession than it was back, 10 years ago when I was investigating cases. There's way more help. But the problem is, I don't think but it's still, the thought of it is still kind of taboo, if you will. It's not something that most law enforcement officers will seek out or even think that they need that type of help.
So for those of you who don't know, every Friday I've got Detective Phil Waters on. He's a Houston homicide detective. He investigated over 400 cases, and he's also a Marine. He's as tough as they get. And I didn't know that the great Chris Anderson is 6'5". He's a veritable giant. These are big,
well, they
tough.
appear together, right?
Yeah, if you missed the last episode, it's Chris and Phil Waters this past Friday. Check it out. But they're big, tough guys. And I asked Phil Waters, and he had one of the cases he had to solve was his former partner was shot and killed in the line of duty, a police officer. Mm-hmm. And he said that they also got called. I didn't realize this, but and I don't know if this is the same in Birmingham, but in Houston, the homicide unit, no matter what, gets called out to every dead baby scene. So he said he saw more dead babies than he ever cared to see. And this is a big, strong guy who wears Hawaiian shirts, but I'm sure it's difficult. He's a very religious man, which I'm sure helps him. But it is not an easy job for sure.
And they're a great team with Chris.
For sure.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you.
Really are.
And Chris, just finally, I'm just curious, like, when did you decide I'm going to write a book about this? And I'm going to share my story. It's not easy to share your story.
Yeah. So I started actually writing the book about 3 years ago. And, I don't know what prompted me to do it. I was sitting around, it was right during COVID time. So I just started writing, and I didn't know where it would go. I didn't know how I would put it all together. It was like I was just putting ideas down on paper. And I started thinking about, my time in homicide and how I got to that point, because I tell the story of how I got to the point of working homicides, which is interesting within itself. And then, I write about this particular case, but, so yeah, it just happened. I ended up taking 2 years off from writing because I wanted to finish up my degree, which I did. And, right after I finished up my degree, my wife says, Chris, are you going to ever finish that book? And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I finished it up, and, we're here now.
That's the irony. The wife got on your ass and made you finish it. That's a great irony. Rebecca writes, Chris, you are the best. So inspiring. Followed by, sorry for what you've been through, but I need better glasses, but you turned into an amazing experience of personal growth. Look at this, Carm. This makes me laugh. From Geraldine, a friend of the show. I appreciate how gentle and kind, speaking about me, not Chris Anderson, as well as respectful you are to your mom.
This is the new
the world needs more men that show such intentionality.
Oh my
I love that.
God.
Followed by Patricia Burns.
To your head.
I love Carm. My mom died. Sorry to hear that, Patricia, when I was very small, and I would give every moment of my future for just 10 minutes in my mom's company. I know it's not the same, but I will loan her out in 10 minutes. At a very,
free of charge.
I was going to say, at a very small price. So last question, the most obvious question, I guess, is how are you and your wife and your Kayla? And I know Chris Anderson Jr. popped on the show the other day, so I know he's well. How is the family unit today?
So I actually have two daughters. My oldest daughter is Kiara. My daughter Kayla is my wife and I's daughter, and my son Chris Jr. They are all adults. They are doing great. They have, I'm as proud as I can be to call them my children. And my oldest daughter and my son Chris Jr. They have made me a grandfather, which is the greatest title that any man could ever have.
And woman.
And woman, that's right. This grandparenting thing is amazing. So we're doing great. My wife and I are doing great. We're about to take I have a little bit of business that I need to handle within the next month or so, but we're going to take a nice vacation, which is something that we've not done in a very, very long time in the next couple of months. So I'm excited about that.
You definitely deserve that.
Yes.
And the wife deserves it even more. Perpetua writes, watch Reasonable Doubt for years. Chris is so humble and so committed to giving families closure and peace, followed by this. Hi, Joel Carm, and love from Ireland. I cannot wait to read the case. The man you're looking at right now is Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson, retired. He's now a chief of police for which university, Chris?
Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama.
Talladega, Alabama. He's the chief of police now. He's moved up in the world, but he is a retired Birmingham Police Department veteran with 27 years of experience. He co-hosted Investigation Discovery's show Reasonable Doubt, and you saw him on A&E's First 48 Hours from Birmingham. He's also a host of the Crime and Cookie Juice podcast and author, as you've been hearing, of the just released book, The Case, which you can buy right now on Amazon. And look at this, Shelly T. Oh no, that's Roll Tide. That's not the one I wanted to bring up. This is the one I want. That's good too. But Cheryl Brady goes, just ordered the book. Carm, do you know what Roll Tide even means, Carm?
Roll Tide? The hardest thing for me is to utter, I don't know.
That is the University of Alabama. Chris Anderson. We'll have to take a ride up for an Alabama football game, Carm.
Oh, it's an experience. You'll never forget.
I'm local right now.
And Chris, I don't know what this means, but you do. Harold Dull, a friend of the show, says, I live in Cropville. Don't arrest me. Followed here by Northern Ireland Nincompoop. Chris speaking out about mental health will hopefully help others to do the same. So poignant to hear a strong man get real. Followed by Nightwood. Very good advice. I always have someone walk me to my car. Please be well, be safe. Buy the book, The Case, by retired Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson. Everyone's saying, get him back on the show. We will definitely 100% for sure get him back on the show. It's an honor.
Hopefully he will want to come back.
Chris, I would love to come back. But I know now I need to come back on Sunday nights when you're with us.
Oh, thank you.
Love you, America. Appreciate it. Appreciate Chris Anderson. Love you, America. Love you, Birmingham.